Tappei has just released Arc 8 Chapter 57, and this video will be a summary of Chapters 54, 55, 56, and 57. Anyways, let's begin. Garfiel found himself in a dark place. He did not know what brought him here. However, because he has a good sense of smell, it allows him to pick up information of his surroundings. The smell was elusive. Garfiel sat on a chair in the middle of a room, with rows of chairs behind him and in front of him. Garfiel remembered that it looks like a theatre, similar to where plays are conducted. As Garfiel said the word theatre, the view became clear. He was in the auditorium, and a second later the bell rang, and the show was about to begin. The curtains lifted, and Garfiel saw the stage. On the stage there was a small cat, smaller than the palm of a hand, even smaller than Mimi. There were 3 small cats on the stage. They all looked the same, but they wore different props. One of them wore a white wig, one of them wore a red wig, and the final one had a golden wig on. They moved to their positions on the stage, where they performed a spectacular arrangement of moves. The blonde and white-haired cat collided. The red-haired cat stood there. Garfiel is confused, but remembers that the small cat is the contracted spirit of Emilia. He has seen this cat from the drawings that Subaru drew. Garfiel shouted, and the 3 cats stopped. Garfiel stands up, and he's told to sit down, as after all it's not respectful to interrupt the stage. Garfiel turns and sees Ram sitting there, and so Garfiel sits back down and the play resumes. Garfiel says they need to leave, and Ram asks if Garfiel has noticed it yet. The golden-haired kitty on the stage is knocked away and falls beneath and is trapped behind a book rack. Ram once again calls out to Garfiel and says that he is dying. The scene changes. The golden-haired cat on the stage is me. When you think of it this way, it's a joke. The memories come back to Garfiel. The red-haired cat is the old man. The cottontail cat is the dragon. And Garfiel tries to charge forward but is stopped. We see that Subaru is also here. Subaru has his normal body size. We see that Beatrice and Emilia are also there, watching the play eagerly. And Garfiel remembers that the cat is called Puck. More and more people come and speak to Garfiel. Frederica, Petra, Otto, and even Ryuzu Maya, his grandmother. Even Rem is here, but she doesn't really speak and ignores Garfiel, of course because Garfiel hasn't really interacted with her. Garfiel is told to calm down and not to rush, and he needs to go back with the souvenir. We see that the person who said this was Roswell, and Garfiel is shocked to see that Roswell is here too. We see that Reinhard is next to Roswell, and Elsa is there and asks whether or not Garfiel will slice her up again. But Garfiel says it will be bad because Meili will get sad, and Meili calms down Elsa. We see that she's next to Rem in this auditorium. Not only that, we see that next to Elsa is Kurgan. Mimi then takes Garfiel's hand. Garfiel understands that his friends in his head are trying to convey something to him. Emilia and Beatrice are getting excited at the climax of the play. Garfiel looks at the stage and sees that the red-haired Puck has now confronted the cottontail Puck. The red-haired Puck is protecting the golden-haired Puck. Ram calls Garfiel an idiot and points at the stage. The golden-haired Puck stands up and pushes the red-haired Puck away. Then the golden-haired Puck is blown away into the light, and shortly after, the red-haired Puck follows. Only the dragon Puck remains. The curtain falls and the audience applauds. The bell rings again, and again the curtains rise back up, once again displaying the final scene of the play. Garfiel watches. This theatre allows for a lot of improvisation. The audience is suggesting ways to get around the situation. What about if you kicked the ground and turned everything upside down? Or maybe taking a friend of the dragon as a hostage? What if Garfield uses the terrain? Emilia is asked to give advice to Garfield, and Emilia says that Garfield getting hit by the tail wasn't really a good thing. Rem and Subaru then applaud Emilia's suggestion. Ryuza and Frederica give Garfield a pep talk, telling Garfield to look around at everyone who's here to help him. Garfield is of course upset since the audience are criticizing the Garfield puck, who's getting beaten up. Garfield then comes to his conclusion. Once he thought he was fighting alone, but he was tasked with fighting the dragon. But that just shows that he has all of his friends in this theatre to help him out. And after all, he realizes he was the person that was asked to defeat the dragon. It wasn't Halibel, it wasn't Rem, it wasn't Emilia, it was Garfield. Kurgan hearing this says splendid, and Garfield heads towards the exit. His mother smiled at him as he left, and then he pointed at the pucks on the stage, stating, "I'm not a cat, I'm a gorgeous tiger." The scene changes. Dragons are compared to natural calamities. Mezeoria transformed the city into a landscape so different than what it had been a few minutes prior. Heinkel, seeing this, trembled. The words "gorgeous tiger" erupt as Garfield breaks through the rubble. Garfield then asks how long he's been out, and Heinkel says 5 seconds. However, Heinkel wasn't the only one surprised. Madeline, who is controlling Mezeoria, asks why he isn't dead. Garfield looks at Heinkel and notices that Heinkel was holding his sword. After all, if Garfield was dead, then Heinkel would have to fight Mezeoria next, and we see that Heinkel was actually going to fight. Madeline tells him to die, and he swings her tail at a lightning speed, almost impossible to avoid. A second later, the Cloud Dragon's body was slammed against the wall of the city. We see that Garfield grabbed the Mezeoria's tail and swung Mezeoria around and threw the dragon into the wall. The fight between the dragon and Garfield continued, and with that, the chapter ends. Madeline is the youngest dragonkin in existence. In order to explain the existence of dragonkin, one must explain the relationship between dragons and dragonkin. The number of dragons that can be seen has decreased due to the fact in ancient times the favourite meat of Reed Astria was dragon. Reed Astria killed dragons, and the dragons who challenged Reed were also killed. Dragons do not need to mate or breed. They can simply reproduce on their own, since they are primarily made of mana. A close analogue would be spirits. However, spirits have stages, like micro-spirits or quasi-spirits or great spirits. Dragons, however, are born as dragons, unparalleled in mightiness and the pinnacle of all living creatures. Dragons have no interest in protecting others, nor need to preserve themselves, since they can reproduce easily. They are not interested in any other dragons, and the reason why they challenged Reed Astria was not because a friend was slain, but simply because they are proud to be a dragon and do not wish that their kind be underestimated. However, the dragons realized they were in a bad shape. They stood in the brink of destruction due to the combination of Reed Astria and the Witch of Sloth. Their numbers were low, so they had a choice to follow the path of a dragon or not. Those who followed their pride flew away, and those who did not stayed. The dragons, however, who stayed were treated as freaks, an anomaly among dragons. The first of these is of course the divine dragon Volcanica, who works alongside the humans. The dragons who stayed were either killed by Reed Astria or the Witch of Sloth, or lived like hermits, and some dragons became human. This is known as dragonkin, and inadvertently Reed Astria was instrumental in the birth of the dragon people. Dragons pride themselves at being at the top of all creatures. Hence is important that they look ominous. The wings, claws, and huge bodies displayed their power as supreme beings. However, in order to adapt to the times, the dragons shed their dignity and took the same form as the human. That is the relationship between dragons and dragonkin. In other words, dragonkin is the evolutionary form of the next generation of dragons that reproduced via parthenogenesis. This is why dragonkin have the same appearance as humans, but have incomparable athletic ability and strength. However, due to this rapid adaptation, there were several issues. One of these is the dragon shell phenomena. The parent dragon's soul is seriously damaged in the process, resulting in a shell becoming a puppet that obeys those who are close to it. However, the extraordinary power of the dragon is still there, so it is powerful, but still not fully desirable. So for those wondering exactly what this is talking about, dragons create children from their own body. So like Madeline, for example. But when the dragon does this and creates a baby, they become a shell of their former self. And they become, I guess, as we call it in the rezero community, they have dementia. There are few dragons left, and even fewer that have evolved to dragonkin. From various perspectives, this evolution could be seen as a failure for the dragons. Dragon people are still being born, and Madeline was one of them. The scene changes. Madeline's body shook. It was unreal that the huge body of the dragon was flung by a small boy. It's completely out of the realm of imagination. With the boy's sharp fangs and ferocious spirit, he was a demi-human. However, it was no joke to survive the roar of a dragon. Madeline takes control of Mezeoria's shell and moves it as if it was her own body. This is a privilege of Madeline, who has a connection with Mezeoria, her parent, and she can use the destructive power her small body is incapable of. If only she had a body like this instead of her small and weak body. Shield of Sanctuary, Garfiel Tenzel, the boy shouts his name. Madeline did not understand the warrior's call and turns herself upright. This shell of the dragon was supposed to be her bridal gown for Balleroy. Madeline releases a blaze of fire towards the royal palace, buildings and streets burning to dust. Garfiel, however, faces the blast of fire head on. The boy prevents the scorching fire from encroaching onto the center of the city, and it prevents the royal palace from being destroyed. As Garfiel sucks mana from the earth with his divine protection, he's blasted by the flames. However, he walks towards Madeline, saying lots of people are counting on him. Step after step, Garfiel walks closer to Madeline. Garfiel was able to overcome the breath of the dragon. Garfiel then jumps up, and Madeline turns her head upwards and fires her blast into the sky. However, Madeline was shocked, realizing that she fired at the royal palace. Realizing that if Garfiel had not blocked the attack, then the royal palace would have been destroyed, including Balleroy and her own unconscious body. Madeline shakes her head in disbelief, realizing her actions were not dragon-like. She was so eager to defeat her enemy, she lost all reason. Yet, the small human saved her body. Madeline says it's all for Balleroy, and Garfiel stares at her. Madeline flaps the wings and creates a large gust. She rose into the air, calling upon the clouds that contained large amounts of mana which she could call down to wipe out everything. Madeline rises, saying that dragons aren't special and only Balleroy is special, as she plans to call down beams of mana to eviscerate Garfiel. Garfiel looks up and calls her stupid. The scene changes. Madeline was born on Mount Parzoa, where Mezeoria was located. The city of Mezeoria was named after the cloud dragon. Clouds always wrap around the mountain, probably due to the dragon that lives there. The height of the mountain was the limit of human survival. No one had reached the summit. The summit was where Madeline was born. She was born as a dragon kin, a new generation of dragons. The birth of Madeline caused Mezeoria to crumble into a dragon shell. The newborn Madeline spent her time in idleness without being taught anything by the dragon, knowing only that they were connected in some way. Madeline did not understand the dragon, so she spent her time in solitude, until it was broken by Balleroy, who reached the summit of the mountain, something no one else had ever done in the history of Arakiya. Balleroy said he didn't expect a pretty young lady and a dragon to be waiting for him. We see that Balleroy is standing next to Carillion. Madeline, who had no name at this point, did not know what to do. Depending on Balleroy's moves, the cloud dragon Mezeoria would eliminate them, like Mezeoria did to other flying dragons. However, Balleroy simply took off his cloak and gave it to Madeline. This was the first kindness and warmth she had ever been given in her life. The scene changes. The strange encounters always occurred in the sea of clouds. Madeline, I'm here again. Have you been a good girl? Balleroy asks. The infant Madeline rushes to the sight of Balleroy. Balleroy pats her on the head. Balleroy, who brought connection to the outside world, was irreplaceable to Madeline. We see that Madeline was given her name since Balleroy asked her what her name was, and she said she did not have one. Balleroy says that it was the name of one of his benefactors when he was young, and he gave her the name of Madeline. Balleroy was shocked by the ability of Madeline's learning. She learned the language of the humans easily, probably due to the nature of the dragon that she had. Balleroy says that Madeline looks good in these clothes. They were sky blue, the same color as Madeline's hair. Madeline counts everything she received from Balleroy. A dragon never forgets the treasure they've amassed. Balleroy then flew off. Balleroy never once tried to permanently take but Madeline out of the nest, since that was against the rule. Once Balleroy tried to, and Mezeoria followed and bared their fangs, so they had to stop. Madeline did not want Balleroy to die, so they couldn't escape. The next time Madeline asked if Balleroy would stay with her, but Balleroy said that he couldn't. Madeline then chased him away, and for the next 3 days and nights she cried, and she regretted her actions. After 3 days, Madeline didn't care that Mezeoria disappeared. After all, Mezeoria would be back after eliminating whatever arrived at the summit. Madeline didn't even notice that when Mezeoria returned, they returned with numerous wounds on their scales. Balleroy did eventually appear again, wounded and apologizing to Madeline. Balleroy explains that he tried to kill Mezeoria. Madeline, seeing his pitiful state, cried and says stupid. Balleroy said he thought he could do it, and Madeline says that the dragon is stupid and not Balleroy. Madeline says she will break through this dragon on her own, and if she does that, will Balleroy marry her, and Balleroy agrees. Some may say that this was not genuine love, and rather Madeline falling in love with the first thing she sees, also known as imprinting. Some might believe that Balleroy's sheepish agreement was a lie to not harm the gentle girl. However, from the bottom of Madeline's heart, she wanted Balleroy. If this isn't love, then she would never know it. She did it over time. She challenged the dragon and sunk her fangs into it, finally earning the freedom of exploring the blue sky, which is the same color as her hair. Eventually exploring the world, and then finding out that Balleroy lost his life in defiance of the Empire. What was she supposed to do? She had no place to go. She had lost the meaning of life. She eventually met the Prime Minister of Arakiya and filled the seat of the Nine Divine General. After telling the Prime Minister of her relationship, a path was presented to her to become a Nine Divine General and then wait for a chance for retribution. She acted out Balleroy's position as a Nine Divine General. However, at the same time, it was as if she was killing him herself. By making up for his absence, you're taking away his position. Then it happened. When attacking the city of Guaral, she met a man with Carillion's fang in a necklace around his neck. And then afterwards, the great disaster happened, and once again her emotions were awakened. The man complimented her hair color and pet her head. Madeline was finally reconnected with Balleroy, but now Madeline doesn't know what to do. The scene changes. Black clouds culminated in the sky. Garfiel's hair stood on their ends. His body, which was burned, was rapidly healing. However, the black cloud was about to destroy the capital. However, Garfield understood it now. The dragon before him was not the majestic dragon that had lived for thousands of years, but they were simply a child crying at the sky. This is the reason why Subaru picked Garfield for this mission. Once upon a time, Garfield was just like this dragon. However, the solution for Garfield may not be the same as for the dragon, so Garfield has to put down his fangs and talk. Garfield tells Heinkel that they need to close the gap, and Heinkel says they can't and it's over. Garfield says they won't lose. After all, Subaru chose him for this. Heinkel is in doubt, but then Garfield says that they need to pry open the end of the old man's words together. The scene changes. The black clouds swirled, forming a cone that interweaves in the sky. Despite having a huge body, the dragon cried like an infant. Madeline swears she doesn't know who it's directed at. By destroying the southern part of the capital, she could ensure that the undead win, creating a cycle of tragedy to come. The unshakable end of the world. Only a tiny brave soul jumps towards the dragon. The red-haired man used his sword as a launch pad, launching the golden-haired boy into the sky. The boy got closer and spoke words. "I'll give you a fist pump. Tell me your story, like I had the general do to me." Garfield's fist collides and an explosion rings out. The dark clouds disappear, leaving a blue sky the same color as Madeline's hair. And with that, the chapter ends. Not because anyone told her to, she chewed on it because. Her body is painful. Every time her heart beats, it feels as if a nail is being driven into her soul. However, the fact that her heart is beating shows that she is in her human form. The unique existence of spirit eaters exists only with Arakiya. It's a forbidden existence created by researchers. Arakiya ate a spirit, however she no longer had her pillar of support, Priska. It was the year she overtook Obart as rank 2. Chisha was reading literature about spirit eaters. Chisha was a wise man. Arakiya only knew she was a spirit eater by her own feelings. Chisha brought up that Priska was smuggled out of the country and was actually alive. Arakiya asks why he mentioned this. After all, they were all involved in the Priska's fake death scheme. Chisha says that he needs to know if she is fragile, if she can be counted on for a great battle to come. Arakiya says that she's a 9 divine general. Chisha smiles and says that the battle will be bigger, and he knows that she doesn't view Vincent as an ally. Arakiya doesn't deny it. After all, she does everything she can for the princess. When will the great battle that Chisha is concerned about come? When it comes, will she be included? Arakiya does not forgive Chisha. After all, he was one of the reasons why she was separated from Priska. But Chisha taught Arakiya how to read and write, so she owed him and would take part in this fight when it arrived. Arakiya's body hurts. She gathers herself up. She can't lose herself. If she cannot keep it under control, she cannot protect her pillar Priska. So without being told, she ate Muspel, taking the spirit into her slender body. Do not let the witch use the spirit to destroy the empire. You really are a handful, the voice states. Arakiya focuses on gathering herself. She feels as if her soul is being torn into thousands of pieces. She endures. The scene changes. I'm sick of counting, but it's becoming a habit. This is the 191st time. I'm so ordinary, I'm sick of it, Owl says. At the second apex, it felt like he was in a different dimension. Everything is on fire. His hands are burning whilst holding his dragon sword. Once or twice he's also combusted in flame. The small boy darts over the magma with incredible speed. He considers himself a star actor of this world. Cecilus, who refers to the world as a stage and considers himself to be the lead actor, is conscious of even looking good to an unseen audience, and so he moves with grace. Who else could have made this battle possible against a formidable opponent? Cecilus flies at an angle. After he steps, the ground where he stood swells and explodes. Cecilus twists in the air and kicks off a stone pillar as thick as the trunk of a big tree, and he darts towards Arakiya, who is floating in midair. Arakiya is weeping tears of blood, and Cecilus's shoe hits Arakiya's torso, but Cecilus is simply knocked down to the floor and his forehead is bleeding. We see that his attack was intercepted, and this has happened dozens of times. Ao says that Arakiya is in trouble. After all, Arakiya's body is currently growing with magic crystals and stones. Ao knew that this meant that the existence she ate was trying to burst out. Her form was beginning to deteriorate. Ao can understand a desire to compensate for a lack of power. Arakiya had many options open to her. Ao and Cecilus had the upper hand, however, by attacking Arakiya to prevent them from targeting anything else. This was a battle of transcendental warriors, and Ao didn't really have much to do, but he did stop Cecilus from losing a limb twice or two in around 200 attempts. Come on, Cecilus says. He wipes the blood off, and the space around Cecilus distorts. Stone pillars spring out of the ground, but Cecilus leaps out of the way and twists. Stone arms appear and grab Cecilus, but he says no touching the actors on the stage is strictly forbidden. I've got you. Cecilus breaks through and rises up to Arakiya. A rock fist appears and Cecilus kicks it with his feet, but his momentum stops in midair. Cecilus continues to advance on Arakiya. However, a white light appears and Cecilus, who cannot move as he's midair, is frozen. Ao moves to intercept the white light and strikes it with his sword. However, both Cecilus and Ao are burned alive. The scene changes. I've got you, Cecilus says. This time, Ao points his sword and casts Dona. The light of doom was blocked and prevented from being started. A flash goes off, but it doesn't damage them. Cecilus praises Aldebaran. Cecilus then uses his right hand as a sword and hits Arakiya, The buildings behind Arakiya collapsed from the shockwave of Cecilus' attack. However, Arakiya's body was unmoved, and Arakiya looks at Cecilus. Her wings, which are her arms, which have now been transformed into rock-like armaments, slash Cecilus, cutting him in half. The scene changes. Time passes and passes and passes, and Arakiya disappears, her existence being destroyed. Arakiya struggles to remember the sun in the middle of her pain and suffering. She was the symbol of Arakiya, and what Arakiya thinks is right. Her existence is the meaning of Arakiya's birth. To keep it from losing its brilliance, to keep it from losing its beauty, she believes the sun will rise again after enduring and suffering. She doesn't care if she can't bask in the light of the sun. If she can protect the dawn of tomorrow, she has come to a conclusion. She initially thought the sun abandoned her. However, the yang sword that was pointed at her did not kill her. Priska could also have escaped, but she became a hostage under the condition that Arakiya would be let go. So now we know why Priska is chained up in the dungeon, because she sacrificed herself so Arakiya could be saved. Her heart and dazzling eyes never changed. When we think of Priska, we can remain as Arakiya. However, your limits cannot be stretched forever. Muspel was eaten by Arakiya, and now Muspel was taking control. Muspel was creating the stone blocks as defensive mechanisms and was protecting Arakiya, as that was the vessel of Muspel. She senses someone is fighting her, draining her power, but it's not enough. We need the sun to come and keep Arakiya alive. So Arakiya waits and waits. I long for the thunder, the real thunder. The scene changes. "Kill me, Cecil," the girl with tears of blood stated. A moment later, Cecilus receives a powerful blow. Cecilus' chest is torn apart, his favorite kimono torn. Cecilus feels pain. He has messed this up. However, he cannot take his eyes off the pitiful girl. The observers talk to Cecilus, and Cecilus tells him to be quiet. Normally, Cecilus wouldn't quiet the audience. However, he needed silence so he could feel the pain. Cecilus falls and gazes at Arakiya. The fact that she mentioned the name of the star actor is, of course, evident. Cecilus falls and avoids a few more attacks. It's hard to imagine that there are any other Ceciluses. Cecilus knows, however, she isn't calling him. Al runs up to Cecilus, asking about his wounds. We see for some reason Aldebaran has his sword up to his neck. Cecilus takes off his kimono and he looks up at the crying girl, the heroine, and says to her, "I'm sorry," before asking the heavenly host to behold, which way will the world choose? And with that, the chapter ends. So for those wondering what's going on, Cecilus is now viewing Arakiya as the heroine of the story, because he's on the stage, and he's gonna let the world decide what happens. The next chapter begins, and this summary is actually taken from the rezero Reddit by OK Worldliness. Anyways, let's begin. Cecilus Sigmund is a stargazer. Cecilus Sigmund is a star actor of this world. Cecilus Sigmund is unique in this world, and Cecilus Sigmund is Cecilus Sigmund. Cecilus Sigmund is Cecilus Sigmund. It does not matter what happened to him. Even if others say that he was an adult, Cecilus is still Cecilus, so he will prove it. So again, this is sort of, I'm assuming it is going back to the previous chapter, where Arakiya is saying, "Cecil, kill me," and Cecilus realizes she's talking about the adult version of Cecilus, rather than the kid version. Let the viewers in heaven also see, which one will the world choose? He ties up his hair and he presses his cheeks with the free hand that changes mood. It also shows the viewer that the stage has changed to the next scene. After doing that, Cecilus twisted his head and said, "If you say so." You're all surprisingly good at hearing things. I don't mind if you resume your chat as usual." And with that, the voices of the observers spoke out. The voices of the audience exploded. They were back to their normal behavior. "I'm going to get back at the person who looked down on me." After saying that, a flash of light pierced Cecilus' face. Owl tried to cut off his head to save him, but before he could do it, he realized that Cecilus, who got pierced, was actually blurry. It was an after image. "It's better if you stay a little far away." His after image bursts and a shockwave spreads out 10 meters around him. The explosion catches Owl in it. But Cecilus is still aware of his exact position even when he's not looking at Aldebaran. It's possible because he analysed Owl's past behaviour and physical abilities. So Cecilus now keeps a mental note of where Owl is located. After all, an actor cannot see every edge of the stage, but an actor must be able to understand every edge of the stage. This technique is the expansion of his imagination. By setting his position at the center of the stage, he directs the actor's movements and stage effects to his liking to create the most appealing development for the world. Cecilus is on the verge of death, and the heroine is floating above him and is becoming more and more deformed. The heroine did not flinch even after getting hit by Cecilus' sword. Keep in mind, Cecilus was using his hand as a sword, and had fine magic crystals growing on her shoulders and arms, making it look like she had angel wings. There's one particularly eye-catching, a magic stone that floats softly around the heroine. She fires one of the magic stones towards him, but he decided to lick it and then is disappointed about the taste. "I see, the taste is strange. What a jewel taste. If it looks like candy, it tastes just like when you roll a jewel in your mouth and you're disappointed. In other words, what the heroine wears is a jewel belt. Come to think of it, at the beginning you were emitting light and fire, but in the middle you changed to stone pillars and earthen limbs, so the jewels are an extension of that. It's really elegant and I like it. Good, that's great. It increases the climax level. Heavenly Maiden of Congo Stone." Cecilus releases a fast slash that can cut even an iron castle in two. The heroine fires all 12 diamonds from her robe towards him from all directions to kill him. A realm is filled with death. A mountain of corpses must dodge the raindrops in the storm. If that's what you need, dodge raindrops or sand grains. If you're exposed to it, you will die. If you are killed, you will be destroyed. If you are destroyed, it will be the end. He keeps dodging all of the flying crystals and is very glad that he's not an adult because it's easier with a child's body. Let your imagination run wild here. The onslaught continued and he ignored all of the gushing blood from his shallow wounds. His thoughts start being accelerated even more, but if things continue like this, Cecilus will be bored, so he instead uses all of his functions to look good on the stage. First of all, the function of identifying colours was cut. The world has become black and white. Next, the function to distinguish between sounds was cut. The voices of the audience and my own heartbeat are cut off by the slow-to-reach band of light. The sound of the stage is being dismantled, is left behind. In addition, functions related to pain, taste, smell are also cut out. My body is fully engaged in the fight, and my head is fully focused on the flashing thoughts, and the theatre of fantasy vision in my brain has begun. He weakened the senses he did not need. He can still appreciate world in monochrome. He can still enjoy silence because the flavour can be appreciated by others. And then he removed all functions related to pain, taste and smell because his body is already fully engaged in the fight. Cecilus continued dodging in black and white the onslaught of the diamond belt. While actors are skilled at creating the scene, the story moves the heart only when it moves. He was angry that the heroine begged him in tears, but he had to find the real meaning of that appeal for his own advantage. He has to process it in slow motion. He thinks about the possibility that she is a fan of the famous Cecilus, but she does not differentiate between this Cecilus and the adult one. Even people like Schwartz and Tanzer were shocked, but all of those problems are for someone else. Cecilus is very glad he's not being compared to someone else, but that she sees him as the one and only. So it does seem like she actually does see him like the actual Cecilus. Interesting. I had the perception that it was the opposite, but fair enough. Anyways, suddenly another Cecilus appeared. It was a result of his increased concentration, so thinking is easier when they have someone to talk to. Now he's having a chat with himself in this slow motion state. I think it's more about my stance towards her than it is about the heroine. Of course, if you look at Boss and Tanzer-san, you can see that the relationship between the heroine and the important characters in the story creates a chemistry that didn't exist before. It's not that hard to imagine. So there's that kind of chemistry between me and her? I don't know. What was your intention in choosing her as a heroine in the first place? But I don't mean to make fun of what Boss calls liveliness, because the spinal reflex is all about inspiration that relies on intuition, and a lot of times I've followed my gut. That's true, so the current situation is also the result of you following your intuition. So isn't it best to follow your intuition in the future? I see, but what she said is that what she's looking for isn't who I am right now. What she's asking for is before Cecilus. But the reason is that after Cecilus thinks that before Cecilus would be able to do it. Is it because people think you can't do it? Then if the current me surpasses the previous me, then it's solved. No objection. So, just in case, because I know that was quite a lot of talking and it didn't really make sense. So Cecilus is talking to himself. And it looks like I was right. So Cecilus says that Arakiya is looking for the adult Cecilus. So the kid Cecilus, having a conversation with himself, says the solution is that I just have to be stronger than adult Cecilus. And that way we can solve the situation. And then in the slow motion realm, Cecilus agrees with himself. Cecilus then ended the conversation. His perception of time flowed faster, and the 12 dancing diamonds, each one with their own will, were slashing around him. Each of them was sharper than Rowan's treasured sword. The way that Arakiya said that Cecil should kill her implied that the adult Cecilus had the potential to kill her. So Cecilus must now surpass his adult self. He dodged all of the attacks by jumping upwards. I can surpass myself. You're also quite competitive, aren't you? The attacks from Arakiya scatter around the sky trying to go for Cecilus. Expanding his imagination field of vision again, he changed the gears of his whole bodily functions again. Color vision, status quo. Hearing, status quo. Reactivate your sense of pain and touch. Hide the pain that suddenly rises up behind a toothy smile, and search for the key, in the sense that 1 second is divided into 100 parts. If you have that, you will have the key that will turn the script to the next page. Cecilus outstretched himself and his leg hit something. It was a piece of rubble and a pebble. He used it as a foothold. He bounces in the air with a very faint touch of the pebble in the air, which he used to jump even higher. Why is it possible? Make them believe what they want to see, and that they can do it because they can. Cecilus ignores various theories and concepts and performs acts that are outrageous against common sense. This is just the beginning to the handful of miracles that he keeps pulling right now. But if he keeps making miracles and he becomes impatient, the reality will reveal its fangs soon. He successfully escaped the beams of lights by climbing into the sky. The lights returned to the crystals. It swallowed and it's about to be fired again as it aims at him. Then the battlefield was shaped by a sound 100 times louder than the previous explosion. But Cecilus was deaf now, so he did not notice it. But it was bad for Al and the heroine. Cecilus kicked the sky. He's aware that there is a wall in the air, so he uses the force to shoot himself directly below as he falls to the ground, dodging the new laser. His right leg is in a pitiful state. 10 steps. He measures the distance of the heroine in the air. The laser is collecting energy again, and he prepares to shoot. 9 steps. The space on the left and right becomes distorted, and stone pillars pop up to block his escape. 8 steps. Through the ground, multiple cube-shaped rocks the size of houses emerge and start to rain like javelins at him. He uses the tip of an approaching stone spear as a foothold to jump into the air. 7 steps, 6 steps, the rest is omitted. He resets the step count and ducks through the storm of pillars, and he manages to approach the heroine, who is furious that someone could get close to her. Cecilus is thrilled to prove to the headstrong and stubborn heroine that he can reach her even now. It was truly one of the world's most dangerous and devastating conflicts of will, one that would go down in the history of the Empire. Cecilus overcomes the tension of will and accomplishes the goal. It's not about what happens when you accomplish something. I want to accomplish it, so I accomplish it. 2 steps. Using the two-handed sword, he blew away the stone pillar in his path. He uses his intuition to measure her distance behind the stone shield. She's now 10 meters above the ground, as expected of his brain. 12 diamonds appear once again. The heroine turned her beam of light towards Cecilus. In an instant, the beam of light spread out with a wide range, dividing into extremely thin beams. Impossible amount of beams of light were falling like a waterfall through the sky from all directions. A single drop of falling light will kill him if it touches him. Lethal, unavoidable, lethal, unavoidable, lethal, unavoidable. The world without colour or sound is filled with death. He's aware that he's accumulated many miracles in the face of inevitable death. It's a miracle that his right leg is connected below his knee. It's a miracle that he can still move despite wounds to his chest so deep that he can see his heart. It's a miracle that his kimono hasn't come undone, exposing his condition. It's a miracle that I'm so motivated by the sight of the heroine who keeps crying. It was a miracle that the prop arrived at the perfect time in Cecilus's hand as he reached towards the sky. The scene changes. 12,288 times. That's the number of times Aldebaran spent trying to figure out his stage role. The battlefield had accelerated to the point where Al's intervention is laughable. At the beginning, where the battlefield was in a defined area, he needed 200 attempts to intervene twice. Now there is no chance to intervene. The new sophisticated crystal attack from Arakiya can no longer be withstanded. The destruction from the diamond belt destroyed an entire area, and Al, who was caught in the crossfire, was blown away 2,000 times. He knows that just being present here is fatal, but he can't leave the battlefield because Cecilus will be killed by the light before he reaches Arakiya. He looked for a room to intervene, to change the unchanging results and become part of the collateral damage thousands of times over. Problems with positioning and sometimes attracting careless attention turned him into charcoal several times. But he managed to notice that Cecilus reached in front of Arakiya. Just before the band of light wrapped around Arakiya branches out into a desperate number of branches, it rains down. Cecilus stretches his hand towards the sky. He thought that Cecilus would unleash all of his strength with his sword hand, but Cecilus's hand showed no sign of moving even at the moment, even though the light was approaching him. Several hundred times later, he realized it was not a sword, but 5 fingers spread out, open palm pointing towards the sky. He expected surprise that Cecilus might start using magic. Even after confirming this, there was no room for intervention, and the trials continued to be repeated in vain. The ultra-speed battle can end as quick as the blink of an eye. Al was consumed that with tremendous regret that he accidentally slipped into a dead end and his feelings were consumed as he turned into charcoal. Even if Al was desperate, Cecilus didn't even look back, and the very angry Arakiya did not look at him. He thought that this dispute was just between the two of them, but what if it wasn't? The possibility crossed his mind, but Al shook his head and denied it. Several times he witnessed beginnings of an idea and a sign of development, but they all disappeared by the light of destruction. However, this time it was unusual. It was carried over from the end of the beginning of the next restart. What if it wasn't? What if there was room for intervention? Al decided to look at all of the possibilities. Cecilus evaded all attacks and arrived in front of Arakiya. In the end, the countless light beams rained down. He tried to process it over and over again until the final act, trying to understand what was going on. Cecilus was reaching his hand towards the sky, and it may have been a sign. Al figured out what he needed to do, and it took him 12,288 attempts. Cecilus's hand, which was now raised to the sky, gripped the hilt of the blue dragon sword that had been thrown into his hands. Al managed to throw his sword to Cecilus, and then he reached for it in front of Arakiya. The scene changes. The stolen treasure warehouse, which served as a stage for a battle over an important item that would determine the fate of the kingdom, finally collapsed due to the intervention of the current sword master, Reinhard van Astria, who defeated the gut hunter, Elsa Granhard. It made me sad. At that time, Reinhard wielded a normal sword he had just borrowed, but because it was Reinhard who used it, it unleashed an attack that many, even famous treasured swords, could not experience. But the sword was broken. What would be better to sit in a warehouse to gather dust and rust, and be discarded or to be destroyed in a majestic attack? One could say the sword accomplished everything in one swing, what other swords needed 10,000 times to do. If the Sword Saint was able to accomplish this, then there's no reason why a user the same rank could not do the same. You did a great job, Al, Cecilus says. Al made it in time, and in some way even Cecilus could not imagine a miracle was delivered into his hands just like he wanted. It's nothing short of brilliant, 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 and it deserves a big round of applause. The unavoidable death that is raining on Cecilus, he understands that the audience would want a beautiful star-studded ending than a boring death. But now that the bad ending was so near, the ending was different from what he imagined. The ending is a rewrite. In an instant, a flash of lightning that exceeded the limits of the blue dragon sword cut down the rain of light and wiped it out. Not just diamond crystals, even the jungle of stone pillars around the battlefield were blown to pieces. At that moment, Cecilus' sword surpassed the Spirit Eater Arakiya, or rather the stone mass Muspel, which could be the very land of the Valakia Empire. And then beyond the rain of light, Cecilus and Arakiya's gazes met. The 13 beams of light were released, and he avoided the attacks. One step. He resumed the counting of his steps for the remaining distance. He kicked the ground with his left foot, and he rose into the air. From there, Cecilus' lightning-fast dash approaches Arakiya in the sky. In an instant, the dodged light belt emitted a colourless explosion, and Cecilus' head was hit by the blast. The scene changes. Cecilus stood in an unfamiliar room. Even if he was forgetful, he does not forget the places or things he sees. It's a place that I don't know about. In fact, it feels a little strange to be in a place like this. In the first place, but it's too much work. Cecilus remembers the battle and what he was doing before this. He was angry that he decided to surpass his past self and shattered Al's blue dragon sword. He does not want this to be the end because he's upset about breaking that sword. After everything is cleared up, he will ask Schwartz to pay him back. He wanted to change rooms, and from the entrance he saw a window with the shining setting sun. It was a good thing, isn't it? There are calls that you don't remember being called. Usually when you're called, it's usually a scolding, but today I don't have to worry about that. Haha, I see. He does not recognize the adult Cecilus who entered the room. After deducing it is him, he thinks that this is a memory before he became a child. Since he aspired to surpass himself, from his position, this Cecilus was supposed to be something like a rival, but Cecilus falls in love with how he looks as an adult. The mind and body was kept in top condition. He can't predict what will happen next, and he even wonders if he will get into the sword fight with his former self. A new person goes into the room with long white hair, white face, and white military uniform. It's just because I didn't think of it that you're just nagging me? If that's the case, you've made a mistake by letting me into the room first. You jumped out of that window and ran up the castle wall. Just get off and run, Chisha. Kid Cecilus is watching the interaction between Chisha and his adult self. He thinks about how quickly popular the Blue Lightning got. He's confused about how popular his adult self is. Even if it's true that they're shrinking, I think the memories they had before became smaller or just sealed away rather than erased. He realizes that this is a dormant memory, even if the technique of shrinking is unknown, so there's no problem with that he sees. This seems like a memory of when I shrunk. When humans are on the verge of death, sometimes their memories flash before their eyes, searching a way to escape from the death that approaches them. It seems like this is Cecilus' version of that event. He's trying to get a hint about turning back to normal and diffusing the situation. Cecilus, before he declared that it will surpass his adult self, reaches the crying heroine, and even the supporting character Aldebaran assisted him from beyond his role. But he still failed to follow through on his original intention of surpassing himself. It seems like the answer to his failure is right in front of him, and Cecilus feels disgusted to the core. The conversation between Chisha and Cecilus escalate, with Cecilus stating he'll take Vincent's side if there was a breakup in the Empire. However, Chisha says that he's got a role for Cecilus, and from this observation, Cecilus learns how to unshrink himself. Reality switches back to normal as Cecilus falls and Arakiya's wings are cracked from his attack. Cecilus now has to make a choice. Cecilus then made a choice. He raised his hand, and in his hand a sword appeared, Masayume, the legendary dream sword. Just like the evil sword, it can cut things that go beyond the rules of this world. Cecilus remembered he could do this. The Yang sword Arakiya uses the sky as its sheath, and the dream sword Masayume uses dreams as its sheath. Therefore, Cecilus borrowed the Masayume from the waist of the Cecilus in his dream. In one swing, the 6 lights that were chasing him were defeated, and his next swing hits Arakiya and knocks her out. Dreams are something that fascinates you when you wake up, Anya. The people you care about also care for you. Yes, a gentle thunderclap gives off a flash that ends the nightmare. This proves that dreams are something that star actors can charm on stage. This was Cecilus Sigmund's answer to the heroine's entreaty, and with that, the chapter ends. Okay, I'm going to be honest, that final chapter summary was really rough for me because I was not using my own summary, but one from Reddit. Yeah, I'm not going to do that again. I know I started a lot and I stumbled, but just bear with me. This is like an hour long. But good chapters. We're getting near to the end of the arc. Aldebaran again saving the day, but I'll speak to you guys later.